Former Vice President Joe Biden has been calling out President Trump in the wake of the shootings in Dayton and El Paso, saying he emboldens white supremacists. Mike Memoli joins us now from Iowa, where he's on the ground with the Biden campaign. And Mike, the vice president had some strong statements just a short time ago. In fact, he's had some powerful speeches throughout the week. How's he positioning himself against President Trump specifically?
Well, the Biden campaign has always felt that the former vice president is at his strongest when the stakes of the election are the most clear. And this was clearly a political moment that they've seized on. I can see the vice president still behind me, still shaking hands. He's wrapped up his remarks about 20 minutes ago. And this was a very different speech than they were planning to give, kicking off a 4-day tour here of Iowa. What the former vice president did is deliver a brushback pitch, if you will, after the president this morning called Sleepy Joe, saying he lost a little bit on his fastball, saying that really in the past American history, presidents have been risen to the occasion, have stepped up at times when we face tragedy, when we are divided as a country, and that President Trump is somebody who, rather than is uniting the country, is dividing us. He said he's been more like George Wallace, the former segregationist and presidential candidate himself, than George Washington, the founder of our country. It was an interesting speech in this respect, though. Biden saying that throughout our history, we've always aspired to lofty ideals. We've aspired to the ideals in the Declaration of Independence and in our Constitution of justice and equality for all. But we haven't always met those moments. And he acknowledged that this history of the American is sometimes complicated. But he said, and drew a standing ovation when he said to the crowd here, that he will not and he cannot allow Donald Trump to be elected president for another 4 years for that reason. So former Vice President Joe Biden here really taking advantage, making clear the stakes of this election at a time when his candidacy in the most polls has solidified since those debate performances, and where the polls still show that most voters do view Biden as the strongest candidate to take on Donald Trump.
Yeah, Mike, it really seems like this week, especially as he's gone head-to-head with President Trump, and President Trump's been calling out Biden over Twitter, that the former VP's had a very, strong week. His performances on stages have been very, very strong. How's the campaign reacting to it today?
Well, I have to say we had this remarkable moment that actually played out while the vice president was giving his remarks. We know that President Trump was in Ohio this morning. He's actually traveling to El Paso as we speak, he's visiting those communities affected by the gun violence of the past week. Well, clearly President Trump was watching the vice president, because he tweeted during the vice president's speech, he said, "Watching sleepy Joe Biden making speech so boring. The lamestream media will die in the ratings and clicks with this guy." Now, if you're the Biden campaign, this is exactly what you want. You want this split screen comparison between what they view as the seriousness of Biden and the lack of seriousness and the lack of real leadership and integrity in the White House by President Trump. In fact, the deputy campaign manager, Kate Bedingfield, retweeted that tweet from the president, said, "Glad you're watching. He's talking about you."
Mike, the team is launching a new digital media buy in Iowa and New Hampshire, specifically focusing Biden's stance on gun control. What is his specific messaging right now there on gun control?
Yeah, well, this is really interesting because we know that Democratic candidates have been attacking Joe Biden over his role in writing the 1994 crime bill. Of course, there are a lot of provisions in that crime bill that Democrats argue was part of what they call mass incarceration in this country. But that crime bill also included the assault weapons ban and a ban on high-capacity ammunition. And so what the vice president is now using this moment to do is call attention to the fact that, as he says, he's the only candidate in this race who's taken on the powerful National Rifle Association and won. He said here today that it was him, along with Senator Dianne Feinstein from California, who were responsible for the assault weapons ban being enacted in 1994. It expired, a lack of political will to renew it in 2004, but he's promising he can do that again. And interestingly, Biden has changed his schedule here in Iowa. He was supposed to be doing a lot of smaller retail events, touring an ethanol plant, visiting the Iowa State Fair. He's now going to be attending a forum, Gun Sense Forum, hosted by Everytown and Moms Demand Action on Saturday, where we expect him to carry that message into that forum, talking about his past record of accomplishment in enacting gun laws, something that Democrats have been really fighting hard, but without success to do so recently.
Yeah, focus of a lot of those campaign talks changing a lot this week in the wake of the shootings. Mike Memoli in Iowa, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hey, NBC News viewers, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here, and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.